Now, it's the same story in South Africa, where the gross domestic product grew 2.5% in the second quarter, compared with a revised decline of 0.6% in the previous quarter. The country exited its second recession in almost a decade in the 3 months ended June 30, after agricultural output surged. The Statistics Office explains the economy expanded 1.1% from a year earlier. Low demand for the country's exports and political turmoil that's caused instability have weighed on output by Africa's most industrialized economy. S&P Global Ratings and Fitch Ratings Limited cut the nation's international debt to junk in April after President Jacob Zuma fired Pravin Gordhan as finance minister, with the changes roiling the markets and battering business and consumer confidence. Police in Rwanda have confirmed the release of a prominent opposition leader, Diane Rwigara, who's being investigated for fraud. Her relatives say the family has returned home, but her phones have been seized and bank accounts frozen. She's been accused of using forged signatures when she was gathering support for her presidential campaign. Ms. Rwigara was disqualified from running in last month's election, which the incumbent Paul Kagame won with more than 98% of the vote. And in Kenya, opposition leader Raila Odinga says he will not take part in the presidential election rerun slated for October the 17th if the necessary changes needed for a credible election are not effected. Mr. Odinga insists the fresh votes must be held in an environment where everything that went wrong can be corrected.
Because you cannot do a mistake twice and expect to get different results. We know exactly what transpired in these last elections. We know what the IEBC did, and we know that if we were to go back, there will be no different results. And that's why we have said that there will be no elections on the 17th of October until some of the conditions which you have spelled out in the statement are met by the IEBC. This is our position with regards to what was announced by the IEBC yesterday.
Joining us to analyze the political situation in Kenya is a lecturer of history, international studies and diplomacy from the University of Benin, Professor Eddie Eregbe. Thanks for coming on the program, Professor. Raila Odinga says he'll not take part in the presidential rerun election if the necessary changes needed for a credible election are not effected. What are your thoughts on this demand?
Well, we want to say that first, we want to appreciate the development that took place in Kenya last week, when shortly after the elections, the Supreme Court was courageous enough to say that there were problems with the elections and decided to, in technical terms, annul that election. And then, of course, the body responsible for conducting the elections has decided to set about what we have just heard from the opposition leader, that is Raila Odinga himself, is that they're demanding two major things that we believe will be difficult to really accomplish. The first of them is that it's requesting that some commission should be removed, and not just should they be removed, they should indeed be investigated and prosecuted. And second, the electoral body. This for us because situation, because we are not sure that the opposition leader has the capacity to be the one that will be making this detection. Because good enough, the cases were taken to court, and the court has said, yes, based on some of the problems with online results that they were supposed to put in place, and all the elections have been cancelled, to now also start demanding this time, because I believe that asking that they should remove some of the electoral officers that were there, members of the commission, is more or less not detecting to the country what and what more. As I have said, this is really putting the entire rerun in jeopardy. But for us in Africa, we are seeing this as a positive development, a situation where elections that international observers, different bodies, the AU and all, had already adjudged to be fair and good. But due to the courage of the judiciary, They have said, no, there were issues because, as the Chief Justice really mentioned, an election is not an event, it's a process. And if certain things have gone wrong with the entire process, then the elections themselves have to be revisited. As I have said, really, it's a difficult. There are already insinuations that Rally Odinga, that has had to run this, that may be out of that is going to be able to. So I believe that there is moderation because Kenya has, we know what happened the last time around when there were protests, over 1,200 were killed. And we don't think that it's worth it to keep holding the country to ransom like this. So in all of this, we believe that Africa really needs some form of mediation of some sort, whereby the two groups, that is now we are talking of the NASA itself, and then of course the group that Odinga represents, should be able to work out some ways by which the elections can still take place.
What lies ahead for Kenya at the end of the day, irrespective of who comes out victorious in the rerun election?
I can't simply.
Prof, I was asking that what lies ahead for Kenya, irrespective of who comes out victorious at the rerun elections?
Yeah, as I was saying, there was communication problem there. But I guess that at the end of the day, like most African countries, Kenya is going through difficult times. They need better management of their affairs. They need to pull the economy out from this crisis. And of course, the infrastructure of the country and the resources should be properly deployed in such a way that Kenyans can get a better life. I don't always feel comfortable when our life, Africa, seem to always be built around elections. You find that from the beginning to the end of a particular regime, all you are talking about is elections, and the countries of Africa seem not to be having enough time to deploy.
We do apologize for the poor signals there, but that was a lecturer of history and international studies and diplomacy from the University of Benin, Professor Eddie Iraigwe. Well, coming up after the break, the number of hungry and displaced people in South Sudan takes a leap. Do join us here.